Hi guys, I'm Shaun McCambridge. For over 20 years, I've been inquisitive, learning and experimenting with different ways to leverage our greatest asset, our minds, to work for us rather than against us. Join me as I engage with these inspirational guests to provide you knowledge and insights to help you achieve more. This show is sponsored by Stellar Recruitment and inspired by our company purpose and why, which is inspiring growth and changing lives. Thanks very much for tuning in. Hey James, thanks for joining us here today, mate. Always good to catch up. Love what you're doing. Obviously keep an eye on it from afar, but mate, you're a bundle of energy. You're inspiring a ton of people, and congratulations on this new book that you've authored. Seems to be getting some great feedback and having great impact. So I guess you've been super fortunate to catch up with some amazing individuals and sort of understand what makes them so. But in terms of, before we get into some of those habits themselves, I guess I'm keen to understand what drew you to studying high performance. I know that yourself as a world champion, obviously high performance is in your DNA, but what sort of surprised you about some of these individuals you've got close to about, how they live and think day to day? Because I think sometimes there's a notion that you think these people are superhuman, right?
Totally.
And those sorts of things. But getting close to some of these wonderful individuals, what have you sort of learned about how they sort of go about their lives on a day-to-day basis at a basic level?
Yeah, lots. Actually, Shaun, thanks for having me back on the show. It's great to be back. Happy New Year to you and your listeners. So I would love to talk about what got me to actually to the point to write the book. And I'm a speaker, not a writer. And so I vowed, why would I ever write a book? But as I kept speaking, people kept saying, James, that's a book. I was like, what's a book? Like, well, what you're sharing, like the framework of high performance. I was like, people can just come and listen. Well, we can only get 80 people in a room, So I ended up writing the book. And key reason being, you mentioned I was a world champion, Shaun. However, people might go, that's high performance. And I won 7 world titles. That's really high performance. But what they didn't see and what we don't see, you and I, we don't see this with Tiger Woods until we see it on the front page. We don't see it with the top athletes, the top CEOs. We don't see what's happening behind the scenes. So for me, yes, I was a multiple-time world champion, but my marriage was heading downwards and ended in divorce. I had a pretty strong relationship with alcohol. I didn't sleep much. I didn't gym much. I worked way too many hours. It was all about career success. Now, I know there will be a listener right now that's listening to this going, I put a lot of time into my career. My relationships could do with a little more love. My health could do with a little more love. That's what sent me in the direction of writing this book. My whole idea was, can someone be a high performer on field, at work, in their career or sport, whilst also being a high performer off field? Is that possible? So that was initially what got me fired up.
Yeah, no, I think that's the challenge sometimes. I mean, I sort of look at my life through the pillars that you learn through things like YPO. There's personal, professional, and family. And often you see maybe 1 or 2 of them going really well, but to the detriment of others. So it sounds like you've been really curious about trying to crack the code, so to speak, and sort of understand how do you perform across all facets of life. But I mean, I'm keen to sort of understand a little bit more about the book itself. So I guess sometimes you think, high performance is doing more. You see the likes of Elon Musk, running, numerous companies, and God knows how he does it all and all the rest of it. But I know in the book you sort of challenge that notion. So is there any particular habit in the book that, I guess allows you to achieve more, but, I guess with less, I guess you talk about this notion of MVP, right? Most valuable priority, and that sort of centers you in terms of what you should be focusing on. But can you talk more about maybe challenging that notion of high performance is just about doing more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had an interesting discussion with one of Australia's leading psychologists on the topic of burnout. And this guy's like Australian of the Year and like just an incredible human. And he said to me, James, your definition of high performance is wrong. I was like, why is that? He said, high performance is simply winning. And I said, is that right? I was like, well, what about the people who won in sport, in movies and theaters, in business, and ended up taking their own lives? Is that what we would define as winning? And he got a bit uncomfortable. And I says, okay, we should be uncomfortable because high performance to me is performing above the norms in your industry and in your life, whilst maintaining healthy relationships and well-being. That to me is truly high performance, and that is winning. So for me, the one thing I see with high performers, and I wrote about it in the book, is that high performers say no a lot. They're very comfortable to say no. I look at Elon Musk and I'm like, wow, you're pretty incredible in a lot of ways. However, there's not one part of my life that I wouldn't want to swap for his life. I just wouldn't want to do that. So hustle was something I did in my 20s and then my early 30s. I believe that hustle is not the way to achieve success. It's habits. And it's not luck or hustle. It all comes back to habits. So the very first habit I would say the listener needs to just lock in for 2026, say no way more often.
Yeah, and I guess, like you say, if you're clear on your priorities, then that sort of helps you sort of run a filter through things that are coming at you, right? Does this help advance my priorities, or is this sort of peripheral to that? So there's a bit of a consciousness and then a bit of discipline to react to that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. May I share a little example of that priority?
Yeah.
So in the book, I've got a thing called the VP filter. And it's the values and priorities filter for making decisions. Now, you and I, we make decisions every moment of every day. Should I eat the thing? Should I take the call? Should I go to the gym? Should I say yes or no? So we need a filter sometimes for the big decisions. So picture this. I'm in Cape Town, South Africa, a few years ago, and I'm sitting down at a cafe. And there's a guy in Cape Town called Siya Kolisi. And for those that are not into sport, he's the Springboks captain, world champion, amazing at what he does. Now, his story is phenomenal. Came from nothing, from ruins, growing up in a township, to being arguably the next most influential figure to Nelson Mandela that country has ever seen. So he has a foundation called the Kolisi Foundation, which is all about ending gender-based violence in South Africa. So I'm sitting down and my partner Caroline, and they say, hey, James, we've got a movie coming out next month. It's called Rise. And it's about Sia's rise. And we're going to release it at the Spotify headquarters in London, England, next month. And it's going to be right before we play the All Blacks at Twickenham. And we'd love you to come and be our host and our MC. We love the podcast. We want you to be there. And there'll be all these amazing people in the crowd. And my ego was just going, oh my God, like I want to be there. Like I run a podcast in New Zealand. I want to be at the Spotify headquarters in London. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So I said, yes, in principle. And they said, what does in principle mean? I was like, I just need to check my calendar. I don't have it with me right now. I'll check it when I get back to the hotel. So I get back to the hotel, get the calendar out, look at the calendar. And on the very same day is my little boy, Finn, who was 6 at the time, his school production, and it's going to be in Christchurch, New Zealand, 12,000 miles away from London. So big dilemma. I really want to be at this event in London. I want to be hanging out with these cool people and at this very special event for Siya Kolisi. But I also want to be at my son's very first school production at the town hall. So I started going through, what are my priorities? And they're very clear. Family, fitness, finance, learning, business, in that order. Now, for any of my clients that are listening, you might go, well, why am I number 5 on your list? I'll say, well, it's an interesting question, right?
Yeah.
Why am I number 5? Well, if my clients were number 1, they wouldn't get the best of me because my family would be suffering. My fitness would be suffering. My finances would be suffering. So when everything else is in order, I can show up. So I'm going through this list and going, should I go to London? Should I not? I go right back to them and I say, guys, I'm so excited for London. I cannot wait for this event. However, I'm unable to make it due to a prior commitment. How else can I help you? Fast forward a month. I'm sitting at the town hall in Christchurch. It's a 2-hour theatre production. Finn comes on. He's 6 years of age. Dances on stage dressed as a fantail and dances to cheeky little fantail with his class for about 90 seconds, Shaun, and off the stage. And I go, did I make the right decision? And I went, hell yes, I did. There's nothing I would ever swap for that little moment that I'll never get back.
Yeah.
Am I the best dad in the world? No. But do I have a filter that helps me make better decisions around my priorities? Absolutely. So I'd love to share that just with everyone. Get a filter for making decisions so that when you're having to say yes or no, you can do it and sleep better at night.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I dare say, without going too far down that path, I dare say things like journaling and those sorts of things help you revert back to that, reflect on that day, look forward to that day and going, are the things I plan to do or saying yes to aligned with those priorities?
100%.
I think that's really good. You also talk in the book about consistency beating motivation every time. And I guess with consistency comes discipline, right? We don't always feel like getting up and training. We don't always feel like getting the work done and that sort of thing. So have you got any tips or tricks around, people that might struggle with that? How do they sort of build momentum?
Yeah, great question. I think motivation is something we all rely on a lot, but it's a dangerous thing to rely on because it comes and goes and there's several things that really impact it. And Shaun, the listener needs to realize, am I more intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated? And you're going to have a bit of both, but you're majority one or the other. So if you're extrinsically motivated, money, status, power, fame, those are the things that will drive your major decisions. If you're intrinsically motivated, it's joy, fulfillment, connection, meaning. So that's the first thing. Get clear on that. One of my clients was the All Blacks captain and was sitting chatting about his performance. And I said something. I said, mate, you're so disciplined. Like with your physical prowess, you're so disciplined. He went, bullshit. Like, what do you mean? He said, I'm not disciplined. I said, yeah, you are. Look at you, man. You're a legend. He says, no. He says, James, I was consistent enough with discipline in one area of my physical prowess to a point where it became a habit. And I was like, bang, light bulb moment. We don't need discipline forever. We need enough discipline for long enough for that important activity to turn into a habit. And when it becomes a habit, you don't need motivation. Like Shaun McCambridge, you don't need motivation to clean your teeth in the morning. You just do it, right? It's one of those things. It's the same with the sales calls if someone's wanting to make the sales calls. It's the same with getting to the gym or whatever it might be. We just need that consistency for long enough to get across the line and realize what does motivate us. What would you say, Shaun, motivates you in terms of, is it money, status, power, fame? Is it impact, fulfillment? What would you say?
Well, I think family's the big motivator, isn't it? Yeah, well, it is for me. I think everything sort of cascades from that. And I think that's sort of ultimately your best legacy that you leave behind. Hopefully, did you do a good job of trying to help your kids become good humans? I think if you look yourself in the mirror and say that I feel like I did my best or I tried my best, like you say, you're not always the best dad in the world you aspire to. I think if I nailed that, I think I would be happy. So, with that comes, providing for them, trying to role model for them, a bunch of them, spend time with them, just presence, shape and guide their, outlook on life and all the rest of it. So I think for me, that's the big motivator. And I think that's a pretty powerful one because, on the challenging days, you still got to show up. You can't just resign from being a dad. You just can't, put that to the side. It's a daily priority, right? It's a really important role to perform. So I think for me, becoming a dad really sort of reshaped that probably earlier on. I was probably more driven by, perhaps status and success in the business world and all that sort of stuff. But I think that pales in comparison now. But I guess, a career also helps support that vision of providing for your family and that sort of thing as well. So it sort of ties into that. So I think it's just sort of evolved probably in line with becoming a dad.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's something for the listener to think about is the evolution of what we value and what we prioritize. I was similar to you, winning, making money, building like future success. Like that for me, that was everything. But 9 years ago, that changed when I became a dad. And now it's like everything revolves around how to be a better dad and partner. Well, actually, I still need to win as a businessman. I still need to win as an entrepreneur, as a performer, because if I don't, that's going to suffer.
Yep. So no, it's good points. This is an interesting one because I speak to some pretty interesting, successful people that from the outside look like they're bulletproof and they've got the success, they've got the gold medals, they've got the World Cup trophies, they've got the houses, the businesses, all that sort of stuff. So they look confident from the outside, right? From the outside, they look, they're super confident and bulletproof. But then, you get glimpses into their world. You see, you open the newspaper and you see some stars falling from fame or whatever the case is. And I speak to these people and they struggle with doubt. They still say, even though they've built $1 billion plus company, they're like, I still suffer from imposter syndrome, which is wild to think from the outside. But those people do tend to recover well from setbacks. They experience those emotions, but they have setbacks, but they tend to move past that and they keep going. So, is there any habit that you've stumbled across that helps people, continue with your quest for whatever's important to you and sort of move beyond those setbacks?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things that come to mind, Shaun. So PVJ, a personal victory journal. This is something I ask all my clients to have. And it's the idea of having a place where you capture those moments that you're proud of. Things that maybe you graduated school, maybe you moved out of home and started flatting, maybe you bought your first home, maybe you made your first billion, whatever it is, but capturing these things because we all have moments of self-doubt. And I was interviewing a prime minister a few years ago and afterwards he turned to me and goes, was I okay? I was like, what do you mean were you okay? And he said, was I okay? Do you think they liked it? I said, what do you mean? You were brilliant. It was awesome. Okay, cool. I wasn't so sure. So we think, that guy's ran the country for half a decade. Of course, he's got all the confidence, but every single one of us, except for extreme narcissists, have a level of self-doubt. It's a good thing. Just don't let it take over. You're either self-building or self-beating. It's either one. It's like you want to be self-building with humility. There's nothing worse than someone screaming from the rooftops how great they are. But it's really healthy when you have a low moment to go back to a place, which for me, it's the personal victory journal. Could be a little phone album with photos. It could be a person. You go back to your mom or dad, if you're lucky to still have them, and they lift you up again. So if you're having self-doubt, you're normal, you're human, it's a healthy thing. If it's spinning out of control, just ask yourself, what have I done that gives me evidence that I can step into this new challenge, or I can take the big swing.
Now, I like that because, I think there was a book by Shaun called The Happiness Advantage, and he talked about the positive to negative ratio of thoughts. And if it was a certain ratio, you would tend to have a better disposition. If it was an inverse relationship where you had more negative thoughts, obviously, that affected your disposition outlook. But I think one thing similar to what you touched on with the noting your victories was a gratitude exercise. Yep. And I guess daily, one of his suggestions in terms of habits was before you go to sleep each night, quote 3 things you're grateful for that particular day. And that might be some of the victories you've had and one thing you're looking forward to, right? So you're actually consciously scanning your day and the day ahead around the things you should be grateful for or the things you've done well. And it sort of rewires your brain in a sense, doesn't it? Because rather than going to sleep going, I haven't yet got the promotion, the house, the partner, the whatever the case, you're actually scanning your life for the things that are going well for you. So it's a really good thing, and just reminding yourself of the fact that, there is often some really good stuff going on, even amongst the challenges that we all face, and we all face those sort of moments of doubt. So I think that's it's a good answer on your part, and another good insight from the book. But environment plays a big part in success. So for you, what are the practical things people can do or change or control around surrounding their work, home, or relationship, to support high performance? Because there's a lot of things within our circle of influence. So what's your sort of take on that?
Well, let's think about that environment thing for starters. So in the past few years, I've done quite a bit of mental skills work with Canterbury Rugby. And Canterbury Rugby, they train at Rugby Park in Christchurch, New Zealand. And arguably, it's like the home of rugby. And that's where the majority of All Blacks are bred. So you get people from all over wanting to leave their regions to come and be a part of the Canterbury program because it just breeds success. And what's the secret sauce? The Whitelock boys, the Whitelocks all came from the North Island, Manawatu region, down to this region to be a part of that program. And you can see what it's done, obviously, for them. So what is it that happens at Canterbury Rugby and Rugby Park? Culture and environment. That's what it is. There's no other secret sauce. People feel like they belong. People feel that they can take risks and fail. People feel like they can go and ask questions and be curious and not laughed at. It's a really special culture. And I'm sure across the ditch in Aussie, you could probably think of a team right now, you're like, that culture is just epic. And I'm not going to name them because I'll probably get it wrong, but So we need to think about that as an individual. So for us to thrive, our environment needs to be conducive for us to grow and learn and fail. So sometimes that means, Shaun, taking stock of who are the 5 to 10 people I hang out with the majority of my time. And are they lifters or leaners? Are they leaning on me and crying about the world and bickering about the government and, just always complaining? Or are they lifters? Are they constantly going, you go for it, that's epic, let me help you with that? We need to be around people who will challenge us and lift us up. So looking around your environment, then the physical environment itself, if it's cluttered, messy, a messy desk, a messy mind. So having real nice, clean spaces to work in. And for people with ADHD, and I'm definitely on that part of the world, it's hard. I put mugs and cups and, a floor drobe everywhere. Like, it's hard for me, but I know when I've got a clean space, I operate better. So there's probably a lot of responsibility that needs to be taken around creating an environment. For me and you, we belong to organizations that challenge us. So YPO, for example, you and me, we've got coaches. Why? A coach will call you out and see things in your environment that you don't actually see. They'll call you out in your blind spots. Someone said to me, I put a post up a while ago and I said, I'll die on this post that you are the byproduct and the sum of the 5 people you hang out with. And someone wrote, you're full of rubbish. Are you trying to tell me Richie McCaw was the sum of the 5 people? He was the average of the 5 people around him. How could someone so epic like him? And I was like, actually, yes. Richie had 5 or so people around him who were way better than him in very specific areas that allowed him to become the greatest of all time. And things like, Steve Hansen, seeing things that Richie wouldn't have seen. Wayne Smith, his nutritionist, his conditioner, yes, he was the sum of the 5 people. And Dan Carter would have been one of those 5 people for him. So no matter who we are, take stock, who am I spending time with? And if it's a family member you can't get rid of, just spend a little less time with them. Sometimes you've got to do that.
That's it. Yeah, you got to be a little bit selective. What about, you mentioned some really good things, but what about, you mentioned before you've been on both ends of the spectrum, maybe from a relationship point of view, right? You've gone from this maybe obsessed world champion and this quest for more and success and all the rest of it. And you talked about that. And now from the outside looking in, it looks like you've got a really harmonious and great healthy dynamic with Caroline, which is great. So kudos to you. So what are the environmental things you've done in that context to enable, because your success hasn't diminished, right? You've got this fantastic book, you're a highly in demand coach, you're a highly demand as a speaker amongst all the other projects and initiatives you look at, you're constantly curious. So that hasn't diminished. That's seemingly gone like that. But, yourself, Caroline and Finn seem to have a wonderful dynamic going on. So talk to us about that, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Honestly, Shaun, I think it comes down to WMI, focusing on what's most important. And for me, I think I had a lot to prove as a young man and left Northern Ireland with a bit of a chip on my shoulder, and winning was everything. And so my marriage back then didn't get the focus or attention that it deserved. And certainly it takes two to tango in terms of there was things that kind of both of us could have done differently. But I learned a lot from that. So I came out of that and thought, okay, time to go. What can I take responsibility for? What will I do differently next time around if I'm lucky to have another partner? So I started looking at my behaviors, how I do get quite obsessed with things I'm passionate about and go deep on work and projects. How might that affect my partner? So I started getting some coaching around relationships. I started getting therapy. And these things give me different tools. And so for Caroline and I now, we work together, which, is for most people, they couldn't ever imagine working with their partner. It's awesome. It's brilliant because we've got boundaries. And we spend a lot of time focusing on what are our next holidays, when are our date nights, and then the business comes second. I was like, we've got to have us first. So I just now look for priorities around family time, carving out time ahead of time, not hoping that I'll find 5 minutes, but creating the space to spend time with the people that matter most.
Yeah. No, I love it. It just seems like it's a conscious thought, but you've got some habits or rituals there around, like you say, the date nights to check in, holidays to get away from it all, not letting work encroach on the calendar too much. So it sounds like you're doing some really good stuff and it's working well, mate. So it's good. Kudos to you guys.
Man. Every day, I think nothing's perfect, but every day just chipping away at it. And
Yeah. So this next one's an interesting one. So in the book, you emphasize clarity over hustle, right? So, there's plenty of pundits out there that say hustle is just so critical. And frankly, I think work ethic is a differentiator, but my view on work ethic is it can become your superpower, but also your Achilles heel if you don't regulate that, right? Because if you're just going to do the basic 9 to 5, there's no way you can achieve anything of significance, I don't think, unless you're this genius. Hard work and dedication is just required if you're going to achieve anything great. But I think if you don't regulate that, and you touched on, sometimes in your quest to achieve greatness, you can become obsessed, right? And it become debilitating. And there's thousands of examples of that. So with that, how do you help your high performers get clear on what really matters? And how do you help them regulate, that notion of striving for greatness, but not to the detriment of maybe other aspects of life?
Yeah, great question. I definitely feel that, if there was a mantra for the book, it would be pick habits over hustle. That would be the thing I would focus on. And hustle to me is a word that we often misuse. And hustle just means grind and go hard and work longer hours. And that to me is not smart. And I'm the same as you in that if I was to work 40 hours a week, always, there's no way I'd be getting the fruits or the rewards that I get in my life. And I see that with every person I work with. The people who put in bare minimum, that's the results they also get, bare minimum results. So a couple of things. The first habit in the book is get radically clear. What do you really want? Most people struggle with that. When most people come to me from a coaching perspective, like, James, I don't really know what I want. I don't know what the next chapter looks like. So let's get clear on what you really want. Then let's make sure we get things in the right order of priority. What truly does matter. And you and I have talked about this before. I don't believe in work-life balance. There are some weeks, Shaun, I'll put hand on heart, be honest, where I'll do 100 hours. And people call it work. I don't look at it as work. I look at it as joy, as passion, as giving back, as making money. It's all of those things combined. I love what I do. But there'll be other weeks when I'll do 7 hours because I'm having family time or I've right in the smack bang middle busy period for everybody else. I'm going off on holiday. I call it counterbalance. It's this idea of just going, you know what? I've got a goal and it's going to take a hell of a lot of work. And I'm going to hustle, if you want to call it that. I'm going to have times of intense focus, but I'm going to have a tool that allows me to recognize when I need to counterbalance. So I have this very simple tool. And in fact, I'm happy to share it with all your listeners. I'll give you a wee link in a minute of a free tool for them to look at it monthly and go, right, what's most important? Let's look at these areas of my life and what's out of whack. So let's say I'm focused on launching the book. So I launched the book in August.
Mhm.
Shaun, for the 6 weeks leading up to that, it was 80 to 100 hours. It was full on. No complaints from me. I was all about it and I loved it. However, my next check-in September, oh, Jesus, my energy's out of whack because I'm not working out. My family time's out of whack. Okay, time to counterbalance. So then in October, go away on family holidays and switch off, stop checking emails. To me, that's counterbalance. And it's about finding that for yourself. Everyone's going to be different. Some people might do it within a day and counterbalance within a day. I'll go hard for longer periods on big projects. I'm not sure what it's like for you, but that's kind of how I operate.
Yeah, but it sounds like you got a mechanism or a tool, like you say, to sort of just reflect on that, and you got the discipline to go, you know what, I've been going flat out for a period of time. You're sort of allowing yourself to have that time to recover, almost like an athlete, isn't it? It's just like, I've gone for this goal, I've gone for the championship, but now I'm just going to recover before I go again. You're just not going to rinse and repeat that to the detriment of your own health or the relationships around you. So it sounds like you're quite cognizant of, you're prepared to do the hard work, but you're going to give yourself that little reprieve as and when you can.
You've got to. There's a piece of research actually in the book, and it was all around this post-event illness. And the science is phenomenal around this. So after the World Championships every year, within about 4 to 7 days, I'd get this horrendous nasal and chest infection every single year. I'm like, must be the time of the year. Once I started seeing the research on this, I was like, ooh, I could change my behavior leading up to the World Championships and see what happens. Change my habits, all of a sudden, never another chest or nasal infection from that point onwards. So I think the fact that, health is a priority. If you don't make time for health, you'd better make time for sickness. It's one or the other.
No, it's a good point you make there. So you are lucky enough to work with some incredible individuals, prime ministers, business people, amazing athletes, humanitarians, all sorts of different people, right? It's not just one sort of style of person, but, all those people share common traits, right? They've achieved some wonderful things and all the rest of it. And they've come from all different walks of life. But, if you were to sort of boil it down to maybe one thing they share or one habit they share, and maybe you've touched on it with the prioritisation or whatever the case is, but what do they share and maybe what separates those people from the people that maybe don't aspire or get to those sort of heights?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a really tactical thing that comes to mind there when I think of all those people and that I've worked with or that I've interviewed. And it's intention. The word intention is so important. They don't leave things to chance. They write specific things down about their intentions and they follow those intentions with actions. This idea of The Secret, which I watched many years ago and I enjoyed, the idea is if you manifest and think about things, they come true. It's absolute BS. You've got to get clear what you want and you can meditate on it, but you've also got to do the work.
That's right.
That's where the gold is. So a good example, my friend John, he decided when he was 7, he would proclaim to his mother 2 things, 2 intentions. 1, I'm going to be a millionaire. And 2, I'm going to be the prime minister of this country. And his mum goes, awesome, you can do it. What does he do? Becomes a millionaire in his 20s and 30s. Well, multi-millionaire. Comes back to his home country after making all his money and becomes a very respected prime minister. That is the same trait I see showing up in the special forces that I work with. I see it showing up in the entrepreneurs that I work with. They're intentional. They make a plan. They stick to the plan. And if they need to change by 1 or 2 degrees because things change around them, they will. But they have a true north and they get after it.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think it's very easy in life just to get caught in that sort of rinse and repeat. You just keep doing the same stuff over and over again. But I think that notion of being intentional, what do you want to achieve? But it's not just enough to go, I'd like to achieve X or Y. Then that needs to be followed with the action, right? So I think that's a super simple way to sort of boil down what separates those people from others. They're very clear on what they want to achieve, what's important, but then that's supported by the action. So it's a pretty simple breakdown if you want to, it's not to say that we're all going to be prime ministers or like John Key, multi-millionaires, but whatever is important to you, right? Be intentional about that, be clear on that, and be disciplined about the habits or the actions that follow to enable that.
100%. And to me, there is a formula. That there's truly a formula to success. And in the book, I've tried to distill that into something that's really practical. And before I forget, actually, that planner, the high-performance planner, I want to give it to your listeners for free. So they could just go to jjlaughlin.com/planner, and I'll get the team to send that through if you want to pop it in the show notes.
Perfect. That'd be good. Now, a lot of people achieve great things and all the rest of it, and then you see the breakdown or demise of athletes and all the rest of it, because sometimes when you're pushing the boundaries, right? That results in burnout. And, if it's not Tiger Woods, then there's, different people over time that have fallen from grace, right? Or just broken down and sort of had to recover before they go again or whatever the case is. So what habits help protect people from, going down that rabbit hole? Because I think when you're pushing and striving and all the rest of it, there can be a downside. We touched on that before, be that your health, your relationships, your sense of purpose, whatever the case is. So any tips or tricks around habits that might protect us against ourselves, I guess? And I guess you sort of talked about how you do that yourself, but what else could you share in that regard?
There's two very, very important things that I want the listener to think about here. The first is leading their life on purpose. So whatever that might be, the work that they do, it could be a job, it could be someone they care for, even a pet, whatever their sense of purpose is, get clear on what gets you out of bed in the morning. We all need that. When we lose a sense of meaning, we start doing things for other reasons. It could be for attention. It could be for fame. It could be to feed a habit or an addiction. But people who have purpose, the science shows this, have better lives in terms of joy. They have better connection and they live longer. So that's the first thing, is get clear what gives me meaning. And it doesn't have to be changing the world. If it is, awesome, but it doesn't have to be that.
So just to jump in there, what's your sense of purpose? What purpose drives you? And is there any other simple examples you can give listeners? Because sometimes you feel like, what purpose? Well, it's such a wide genre. Where do I start? How do I define that? So can you share anything there that might help the listeners sort of understand or distill what that might look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So two things there, passion is for you, purpose is for others. It's what you do for others. So I've got two senses of purpose. One is personal, and that is as a dad and as a partner. And if I get to 90 and Finn's, 60 years of age, and he says to someone without me there, says, my dad was a good dad, I will be ecstatic. Job done, tick. Yeah. That's awesome. I don't need him to say world's best dad. I don't need him even to say excellent dad. If he can say he was a good dad, awesome. Like, just thinking about that now makes me feel like overwhelmed with joy. That's it. That's my purpose. Same with Caroline. When I get to my last day, if I die before her, I want her to go, he was a good partner. That's it. Not the best, not perfect, but he was good. That's it.
Yeah.
That's personal purpose, professional purpose. This is way bigger than me. It's way bigger than my company. It's way bigger than my podcast. I want to see a world where possibilitarian thinking is the go-to. So when we have these big problems, these challenges, people running into countries and kidnapping people and threatening, when those things come up, I want people to turn to possibilitarian thinking. For a personal person listening right now, it might be if I get in a car crash and I'm not injured, but the car's wrecked and I'm late, how could I be a possibilitarian? For the person that just got dumped or divorced and is going through a tough time, what's possible? That's my purpose, is to try and help people unlock that level of thinking. So for the person listening, just get clear on what keeps me up at night, what makes me cry, what angers me, what brings me joy. Those questions will help you find your purpose.
Yeah. No, fantastic, mate. I love it how you sort of just break down and sort of make that simple. And I guess, once you're clear on those two very simple purpose for you, I guess that helps distill your priorities and what you say yes to and all the rest of it, and the actions and behaviors that sort of follow. So I think, really good example on that. But I guess as we're sort of drawing to a close, and for those that want to encapsulate some of the stuff we've talked about today, there's a bunch of habits in there. There's a bunch of things we can do. Sometimes that can be a bit overwhelming, but if you were only to choose, say, 3 habits to sort of kick off 2026 and all that might be possible, what would you sort of recommend people, really honing in on?
Yeah, great question. Let's get tactical there. First habit is having a really high performance routine. Now, a daily routine. What I'm not going to say is you have to join the 5 a.m. club. I'm not going to say that. What I am going to say is you need a structured day. And if you're a shift worker, this could be more challenging. I get that. But a go to bed time and a wake time. And with that, having a routine. When you wake up, take this bad boy. And for those that are listening, I'm holding up my phone. Take that phone and put it in a different room. Wake up with a really simple routine. The routine that I wake up with, meditate, journal, read 3 to 5 pages, get up and move my body, hydrate. That's it.
Yeah.
30 minutes to an hour, and it's a whole different version of James. Go to bed. I've got a 3-2-1 routine. 3 hours before bed, no work. 2 hours before, no food or water, anything. 1 hour before bed, no screens.
Yeah, love it.
That's it. That's a really daily routine for me, but everyone can work out what works for them. That's first habit. Second habit, walking into this year, know what you don't want. Get clear on what you don't want. And the big thing I fight for is like mediocrity is something that we accept into our lives very passively. Let's be standing at the fortress of our mind and go, no. I will not accept that. I'm not going to call it in and be weak. And what I mean by that is saying you're going to go to the gym, saying that you're going to write the book, saying that you're going to resign and go to the new place of work. Weakness is not doing those things. Strength is the courage to be afraid as hell and doing it anyway. So that's the second thing I want people to do. Get clear on what you don't want and guard your mind. Number 3, I think the greatest solution to almost all of our problems comes in the form of slowing things down and reading books. Reading books. So I'm going to recommend a couple of books that people should read. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Everyone should read that in their lives. Think and Grow Rich. Sounds like a money book. It's a mindset book.
Yeah. Napoleon Hill. Yep.
Napoleon Hill. It's phenomenal. 4,000 Weeks, which is it's the typical length of time a human lives for. It's about how we use our time and how we respect it. If we can slow down and read, we get time to reflect on ourselves. We get time to add value to others. To me, that's one of the greatest habits, and it has arguably changed my life the most, even more so than coaches. Reading has been the biggest impact in my life.
That's awesome, mate. There's some huge takeaways there. Looking forward to maybe checking out or revisiting some of those books that you mentioned. But again, really simple, mate. And I think there's real beauty in that simplicity. It's not overly complex when you boil down some of the things you've talked about today, which is great, easy to grapple. And I guess just getting those habits in play. A couple of quick things before we wrap up. Firstly, your experience around creating habits that's sustainable. So some people talk about 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. In your experience, what is your recommended time frame to persevere before it becomes ingrained in someone?
Yeah, so research from University College of London shows that on average, it takes a habit 66 days to become a habit, to the point of automaticity. That's the point at which you do it without friction and you do it without really thinking. However, when you look at the reality of it, if I said to you, Shaun, I'd love you to read 3 pages a day of a book, you could probably make that habit in 20 days. Where if I said, Shaun, I want you to do 4 45-minute high-intensity interval trainings a day, it might take you 2 years to make that a habit, because you'll burn out, you'll get injured, you'll get bored, you'll get tired. It does depend on the habit. But on average, 66 days. So 2 months we're looking at.
Okay. Now, that's good. Good to know. Mate, you've been very kind with your time again. I know you've got a lot on your plate. For those that want to find out a little bit more about you and what you're doing and all the rest of it, you've got an amazing podcast. Obviously, you've got this fantastic book. You've got these cool, retreats that we were talking about before. So if I want to sort of follow or track what's going on in your world to help me, how would I do that?
Yeah, super simple. So if they want to get the book, they can go to Amazon in Australia there and get the book, or if they're anywhere in the globe, go to Amazon and look for Habits of High Performers. If they want to follow along, I do obviously lots of interviews and share lots of insights on Instagram and LinkedIn, and they just look for James Laughlin. And if they want to come to an event, we run an event once a year in Christchurch, New Zealand. We're actually looking at doing one in Australia maybe at some point mid-year. So Shaun, we should
awesome.
Keep them in the loop on that one. So come and say hello.
Fantastic. And your website is, and your podcast is?
Yeah, so jjlaughlin.com. And our podcast is Habits of High Performers. It was the Lead on Purpose podcast for 450 episodes, but it's changing as of early February. So when this podcast you're listening to is live, I'm sure it will be Habits of High Performers podcast.
Excellent, mate. Well, keep up your great work. All the best to yourself, Finn and Carolyn, for what's ahead, mate. And really looking forward to getting together, all going well in June. But yeah, you're inspiring a ton of people. You're doing great work. Well done on living your life on purpose. And such a pleasure to catch up today.
So good to see you, mate. All the best for a great 2026.
Thanks, mate. Thanks so much for tuning in. It means the world to me. If you got something of value out of the podcast, I'd love you to pay it forward and share it with anyone that might benefit. Thanks again for tuning in.